Welcome, everyone. For those of you that do not know me, my name is Bas Blauw. Like Shazid just said, I'm the first secretary of the Kingdom of the Netherlands here in Bangladesh. And today I have the honor to moderate a panel session for you with 6 distinguished panelists. And I will, of course, allow them to introduce themselves, but I'll quickly go over them. Here, physically with me, I'll start at the end, is Sharika Sadaf, who's the program manager here at YY, on partnerships with YY Ventures. There's Bijan Islam, who's the co-founder and CEO of Light Castle. We have Siddhartho Goswami, who is the head of operations for Startup Bangladesh. And digitally, we are joined by Zinat Islam, who is the relations manager at the academic network of the Yunus Center. Theodor Kluvas, who works for the Netherlands Enterprise Agency for the Orange Corners program. And Najar Rahman, who is the CEO of Bangladesh Angels. Large panel, lots of interesting ideas, I hope. So I'll just share with you quickly the overview of the session, the goal that we're trying to achieve, and then I'll try to shut up as much as I can, so to give the panelists the word, of course. So what we're trying to do here today, for us as the Netherlands, we have a bilateral relationship with Bangladesh that is based on mutual investment and trade, and that's a bit of a transition that we're going through right now. We are phasing out some of our development programs and focusing more on private sector development and mutual investment and trade. And within that relationship, startups and entrepreneurship is a crucial element of that. So we're very excited, and I can also say that on behalf of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency, that we came on board to support the YY Goshi Incubator Program in the end of 2019. And what a year it's been last year. It's I think we've all personally and professionally been challenged beyond anything that at least we thought would happen in the last year. And that's also something that brings me to a first question to our panelists. The way we'll do it, we basically have 3 rounds of questions. We'll go through these questions and I'll give all the panelists a chance to say something about that. I also encourage them to respond to each other if they want to, but we'll have to strictly monitor the time a little bit, so I'll cut you short if it goes on too long. After the 3 questions, we'll go on to some interaction with the audience. So if you have questions, feel free to send them in. They will reach me, and I can find the right moment to bring them in, and we can have a discussion on that. Please say where you're from, what organization you represent, and who you aim the question at to get the most out of this part of it. And then I think in the end, I hope to have a very short, consolidated advice from our panelists, just to close off the session and give you some inspiration for the time to come. So, without further ado, I would like to give the floor first. Maybe you can start with Siddhartho. So, tell us, who are you and what happened to you and your organization the last year? How has the pandemic shaped your vision on the ecosystem as a whole?
Well, thank you, Wes, for giving me the floor first. Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, this is Siddhartho Goswami from Startup Bangladesh. I am currently working as the head of operation of Startup Bangladesh. You know that Startup Bangladesh is one of the flagship program of ICT division. Mostly, that we are working with startup from Innovation Design and Entrepreneurship Academy. In short, it's called IDEA Project, from where we're actually providing pre-seed grant to the startup. So before joining Startup Bangladesh, I used to work with United Nations for quite a long. So during the pandemic time, actually, I know that I got the opportunity to work with United Nations as well, and eventually then I, shifted to Startup Bangladesh. So I think better I can, cover up from the both point of view that during pandemic, how we actually shifted the whole thing and how we actually, cope up with the whole thing. From Startup Bangladesh, during the pandemic time, we, unfortunately provided any incentive to startup, but eventually we started few programs that actually create a platform for startup. One of the program was called Food for Nation and Health for Nation. So Food for Nation was designed for the startup, those who were working with the food industry and also that the agriculture kind of thing. And for Health for Nation program was designed for startup, those who are actually that providing all that the healthcare technologies kind of thing. So that actually helped them a lot to generate some money. And from UNDP's point of view, if I talk about probably, that some of you know that I used to lead a program. It's called Digital Kitchery Challenge. So during that pandemic time, we actually, organized that program over online, and we focused on some program which was very much related with the, that the situation. Probably, that when we started that lockdown, most of the people was paranoid, and they that threatened about the frontline fighter, and they did something unconventional kind of thing. So we initiate some program, and we designed a program, how can we actually counter the social stigma kind of thing. So that this sort of initiative we took during that pandemic, and eventually that the startup, they are actually that facing a lot of problem because of that pandemic, because they couldn't actually communicate with their customer. So yeah, so I think that's all from my end. So if you have any question further do, then I will get back to you.
Thank you so much. No, and I think it's been remarkable how resilient the whole entrepreneurship ecosystem as a whole has been. I think many elements in the economy came to a standstill, and it was, I think, the entrepreneurs in many ways that were able to find those solutions. And I think those programs for sure have helped support them. So thanks for that. Maybe over to one of our panelists that joined us virtually. Zinat, can I give you the floor?
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Zinat Islam, and I'm the Relations Manager Academia Network at Unit Center. And what I work on at Unit Center is we work with academic institutions, universities, colleges, on establishing the YSBCs, which are Social Business Centers. So these are centers that focus on promoting social business, establishing social business courses, undergraduate, graduate, short courses, research on social business, workshops on social business. So that's what I work on at Youth Center. And pandemic is a great opportunity for us to be able to reach out to different universities, because everything is virtual. We're not limited to going to a physical location. We're able to, do a workshop in Latin America, New Zealand, Australia, Europe, US on the same day, different time zones. So we've got that advantage through the pandemic. And Professor Yunus from the Unit Center, he's been able to talk to numerous students all over the world, which has built him, the Zoom platform we're using has been a great blessing, I would say, of able to connect us. So this pandemic has, during these last 12 months, we've been able to reach out to numerous universities. We actually have been working with 2 universities specifically in Colombia as a part of our project. And through them, we've been able to start a research program in social business, again in the initial starting phase, which in Colombia. And similarly, we'll be doing such workshops with universities in East Africa. So, through these last 12 months, we've really been able to expand our reach and target more universities to, spread the word in social business. So, that has been something we at Unicenter have been able to do with greater force, more, more reach during the last 12 months. So.
Thank you so much. Then maybe over back here in the physical realm, over to Bijon. Tell us a little bit about yourself and also how the pandemic influenced you and your organization over the last year.
Thank you for giving me the floor. As you might already know, that Light Castle is a consulting company. And one of the positive side of running a consulting company is that when the economy is doing well, we sell organizational expansion strategies. When the economy is not doing well, you sell, organization turnaround strategies. So I think that's something to think about. I think during the pandemic, we focused on 3 specific domains. One was supporting the ecosystem. So to do that, we supported other accelerator incubators, whether through online programs, whether through advisory support services, whether through capacity building, and helping out, reaching out to startups through those accelerators and incubators. So supporting accelerators and incubators into the ecosystem was a part of what we did. The second thing we did was on the investment front. We do act as buy-side advisors to local and international investment funds. And we try to bring in investments, whether it's local, whether it's global, to startups in the ecosystem. The deals aren't disclosed yet, but we did do double-digit deals through our partners, Roots of Impact, Swiss Development Corporation, Startup Bangladesh Limited, and through some of the proprietary fund that we also manage from Lightcastle. And I think as those deals started happening in 2020, that is one of the ways we supported the ecosystem as well. The third thing we did was advisory and data. Under the advisory, we actually worked with the Ministry of ICT, and we did the ICT COVID-19 roadmap. I think that was a big work with the government, but apart from that, we also work with a variety of partners to support the business investment ecosystem. One of them with the Netherlands Embassy and a consulting firm called Lariv International, where we did investment summits to garner investments on the Bangladesh market. On the data side, we made a lot of data public. I think throughout the pandemic, we had close to 30 plus reports on different COVID impact on SMEs, startups, data on dashboard, data on startup investments that are happening. And we continue to do that because I think building democratized data can help us fight the pandemic better. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bijan. Maybe over to Neerjor. Could you help us out a little bit on your background and how you view the last year?
Thanks a lot, Bas, and thanks for having me in the panel to the YY Goshti team and obviously the attendees. So my name is Neerjor. I'm the CEO of Bangladesh Angels, but ironically, I'm calling from Dallas, Texas, because this is where my family is and this is where I've been during COVID. But hope to be back next month on the ground and to see many of you in person. Yeah, I think for us, as you know, we are the first and largest angel investment network in Bangladesh. We focus on being the first kind of professional check or investment check into early stage companies, startups, and social businesses in the country. So in a weird way, knock on wood, but 2020 and COVID was actually kind of good for us in the sense that we've managed to triple the size of the network, right? So we now have more than 170 plus kind of institutions and individuals around the world. 45% are actually outside of Bangladesh. So that's quite interesting. And these are members who pay to be part of us, right? So that there is some kind of stake in the game, I guess. Second is, we've managed to kind of triple the size of our portfolio as well compared to 2019, or at least how we ended 2019. As of February 2021, we have around 14 kind of companies in our portfolio and pipeline at various stages of between commitment, signing, and disbursement. And this in aggregate represents about $1.2 million worth of investments in the last 18 months. So that's quite interesting and exciting. I guess the 2 points I would make here is, we've been helped by the fact that during the COVID period, I think a lot of founders have become much more eager to raise capital, be a lot more flexible when it comes to their fundraising expectations and valuations. That's certainly helped us in terms of kind of giving us some tailwinds. And second is, I think the culture of doing business in Bangladesh has also changed. We were kind of wary. We used to meet physically, we used to meet physical meetups, et cetera, but we moved everything online. And that allowed us to, one, move faster. We are now showcasing a deal every week pretty much, and closing deals pretty much every month, whereas it used to be on a quarterly cycle. And second, it allowed us to reach a much more international audience, including the diaspora, which is quite key. I think a lot of organizations in Bangladesh are actively trying to reach out to the diaspora, but I'm proud that we're one of the few ones that have been able to kind of mobilize investments through that. And we are in the process of creating standalone chapters in North America and the UK and the EU this year, for example. So that's quite exciting. And also, I think, and beyond that, the global kind of angel ecosystem and a lot of these different platforms and VCs have been kind of quite eager to engage with us now that we're online, and a lot of our activities are kind of more easier to, I guess, engage with. So those are, I guess, how I would kind of think about, how the pandemic has influenced our organization's work. And we're definitely keen to kind of take that approach, continue that approach, but also get back to physical meetings because we do like those as well in 2021. So that's where I would end it.
Thank you so much, Neerjor. And I'm sure we'll get back to the changing in the culture of the business as you just put it. I think that's definitely one to expand on. I have two panelists left. Maybe Sharika first?
Thank you, Bas. I am Sharika Sadaf. I am the head of programs and partnerships at YY Ventures. But my day-to-day job is to look after the incubation arm of YY Ventures, which is YY Goshti. And YY Goshti is an incubation We incubate early social entrepreneurs, startups. We are backed by the Yunus Center, and we are powered by, very kindly, the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. So YY Goshti was an idea back in 2015. And our founder, he really didn't know what an incubation or an incubator was, but he had an idea, and he thought that when our resources are limited, we want to focus on a shared economy. As human beings, we need to eat, so we need to look after our farmers, and we need access to clean water. And if we cannot create jobs for next generation, there is no future. So with this idea and with this vision, back in 2015, he was in Germany, and he was in conversation with a few of his mentors, where they actually told him that, do you know that this idea that you have, it's actually an incubator. Long story short, 5 years, 6 years, this is YY at 6 years down the line, we have successfully incubated 54 startups, and we have impacted more than 100,000 Bangladeshi lives. In 2020, during the pandemic, we ran 2 incubation programs, one in spring, one in fall. Both of them were online, but it was, I would say, it was it was quite successful, because we have had, previously you could see, there was a session, the Changemakers Meet, where 7 of our entrepreneurs had pitched. Tomorrow, our fall cohort is going to give their startup pitch as well. So even during the pandemic, I think we did quite well in terms of that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And no, I completely agree with you. It was a very, also as Nidra said, right? I mean, technology also gave us some new advantages in the way we were able to have a look at what's happening in the cohorts that were being incubated was pretty unique, I felt.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, then last but not least, over to Theodor Kluvas.
Hi there. Hello, everyone. Yes, well, short introduction of myself. My name is Theodor Kluvas. I'm the program manager of Orange Corners, which is an initiative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, currently operating in 13 countries, 16 hubs. We use our embassies to really put on the credibility and the network and connect them to a local hub. So it's not a new initiative. We set up a corner inside an existing hub, and we make sure that the private sector, the local private sector, and the international private sector co-fund the program. We do that because we believe in financial sustainability. Our government is not there to stay forever in those hubs. We just want to kickstart and make sure that entrepreneurship is one of the solutions of youth employment. On a yearly basis, we incubate more than 600 entrepreneurs on those 16 hubs. And next to that, I'm also a policy officer on youth employment at our Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have a Youth at Heart strategy. And in that strategy, we try to put youth in the epicenter of our foreign development agenda. And I've been involved in that in drafting and participation toolkit to make sure that the voice of youth in every country is translated into our policy and actions. In the past, I've been analyzing more than 40 ecosystems in Africa, Middle East, and Europe. We see a lot of similarities there, and we strongly believe that we cannot assess a local ecosystem if we don't understand it ourselves, and make sure that our colleagues from the embassy, and Bas was our colleague in Sudan a couple of years ago, and we worked together there, because only by understanding you can really see what the youth is going through. Now, with regards to what is the impact, Well, where do I start and where do I end? First and foremost, I'll start on a positive note. I think majority of the countries managed to leapfrog the challenges that we're facing for years and years in terms of bureaucracy. A lot of things went digital suddenly, and over the time it improved as well. But it also made us very clear that internet is unfortunately not a social good. It's not accessible for everyone. So that's why we made 12 gigabyte per person per month available, so that they could be continuing running their business or drafting their business online. And going online has not been easy because our teams were not used to that. Everybody was used to go on physical spaces, meet with each other and discuss it. So going online has been a challenge. And not to mention the psychological impact, which suddenly everybody had to stay at home, and especially in challenging environments such as Baghdad or even Khartoum or other cities that we were active or that we are active. Suddenly everybody had to stay at home with their parents and friends and families and their family themselves and try to run their business. So there was a lot of impact there as well. And of course, our ministry was caught by surprise. And it's funny enough that a lot of discussions were like, are we going to have budget cuts? Let's wait with everything. So it took months to really understand the dynamics of it. And that uncertainty caused also some of our private partners to reconsider their funding, which is a challenge because the funding, 100% of it doesn't go to us, but goes to the local hubs. And all those private partners were caught severely by this pandemic because they could not trade, they could not export their products. But I'm happy to see that all of the teams, and this is a kind of a characteristic of all hubs and all like-minded individuals like me and all of you in the panel, the daredevils that regardless of what's happening, we're going to make it. And that's why our team in Sudan also started a core virtual hackathon just 3 weeks after the pandemic to make sure that all businesses can continue operating online or with the right safety measurements. That's from my side.
Thank you so much, Theodore. And just in case it wasn't clear to the audience yet, I think with many thanks to the introduction of the panelists and their reflection on the first question, I think we can probably guess what unites them, what is common to all these panelists. And I'll give you the answer. They're all enablers in the ecosystem, and every single panelist has, from his or her perspective and organization, helped so many entrepreneurs set up their business. And I think that's, I'm really glad and really grateful to have that expertise and those perspectives here today. Which basically brings me to the second question, because now that we've looked back on 2020, I want to delve a little bit deeper into what exactly the ecosystem is and where, from your perspective, you see the particular challenges but also the opportunities that are there. And I realize, of course, that as ecosystem enablers, we are not perhaps the whole ecosystem. There are, of course, also parties that aren't here, some parties that we have less influence over. But I'd invite you to speak your mind and, just to take us along with you in your perspective on where you see the general, more structural challenges and opportunities in the ecosystems, both in Bangladesh but also globally. So who can I give the floor first? Theodore, back to you. Let's do it like this.
I'll start the conversation a little bit. Well, basically, I'm known for being quite bold, so I'll do the same. At the moment, entrepreneurship has been characterized as being a new religion. Everybody puts money and efforts into entrepreneurship, yet youth unemployment is a much larger challenge that entrepreneurship can solve. It's one of the solutions, not the solution. So in ecosystems, I do believe that collaboration and focus is very important. You need governments that understand what the difference is between a startup and a scale-up. What is an angel investor? What's a Series A funding? And that's not something that they know already. So we really need to start from scratch and explaining them what their role can be. The same comes for university. If it is to invest in the future, we need to capacitate our youth with the right skills and the 21st century skills. soft skills and digital skills so that they can continue operating globally. And of course, all those hubs, they need to understand that the pie is huge. Bangladesh has 160 plus million people. So there is no one hub that does it perfect. And only by collaborating with the private sector and the government and universities, we see that ecosystem propel. So collaboration is key.
Thank you so much, Theodore. Let's see who's next. Maybe Bijan?
Yeah, sure. I think giving perspective is in three different ways. Where the ecosystem is right now, what are some of the challenges that we're seeing, and of course, where do we see some of the opportunities for the future? Ecosystem, to be honest, if I even just look at the startup ecosystem as a subsection or subset of the whole wider business ecosystem, 2020 was a good year, not a good year for a lot of the startups, but still there were close to 36 million in investments. In 2021, I'm excited because on the first couple of months, with support from all of us here, we have already reached 22 million in startup investments as well. That's good. But I think if we think in terms of maturity, I would say we are still 5 to 7 years behind Indonesia. In terms of global startup ranking, it's ranked 98. I think the one number that scares me the most is 168. So that is our doing business ranking. And if you compare with India, which is 63, we compare ourselves with Vietnam, which is ranked 70. And that brings to my second point. While the ecosystem has done fantastic, a lot of private sector support, a lot of development partner support, a lot of support from the government side. Launching of the Startup Bangladesh Limited, the $60 million VC fund, support from the IDEA project, which is supporting startups for a long time. But I think if we cannot improve the business environment in general, especially if you look at the doing business index, it kind of encompasses everything from opening up a business to enforcing contracts to getting electricity connections, having proper tax compliance. So we really need to figure out how do we get that 168 to double digits, right? I think if you look at a kind of connecting theme, that is where definitely we should something look at. In terms of opportunities, to be honest, I think there's immense opportunities. It's a country that has grown between 5 to 8% for over a decade. And it's not a fluke, it has grown. Even during the pandemic, we had a 5% growth. A lot of economies went to negative. But we have a density dividend, more than 1,200 people per square kilometer. We have a demographic bulge. We have a large middle and affluent class population, which will become 34 million by 2025. Development is happening all throughout the country. Private sector sentiments are going into positives, and there are so many opportunities and industries to come up. What has taken Bangladesh over the last 10 years won't take us over the next 10 years, right? That's something that Nijur Bhai always says, and I agree with that. The opportunities that we are seeing, bKash is becoming in finance much bigger than other banks, to be honest, right? We're seeing so much opportunities. Orders of Chaldal doubled just within the pandemic, right? We're seeing technology coming in disrupting, whether it's logistics, mobility, finance, healthcare, education, agriculture, and I think that is something where we need to look at to become an innovation-driven economy from a factor-driven economy, and that is the opportunity that Bangladesh can exploit. Because as I say, in other economies, people have leapfrogged to smartphones, not using desktop. I say in Bangladesh, people are just not leapfrogging to smartphones, they're leapfrogging banking. They're directly coming in and going to fintech and having the proper banking channels, KYC, they're just skipping everything, right? I think that is the opportunity that we have. Process innovations and use the technology, leapfrog a lot of development pathways that other economies need to go through. So again, those are some of the things that I wanted to share. Back to you.
Thank you so much. Maybe we can go over to the next panelist.
I can add something.
Please.
Just share, almost a similar point what Bijan Bhai also mentioned. In 2021, we have to think in a different way because, that due to pandemic, that 56% startup actually, they declined their business almost half. And rest of the 24%, they stopped their business. So, that you can't actually think in a similar way you actually, did earlier. So you have to think in a very, new approach. the problem, and also that considering the opportunities like what Bijan Bhai mentioned, that I must say that that under the charismatic leadership of our ICT State Minister, so that startup actually the startup ecosystem started Bangladesh not too actually that long. Within a very short span of time, actually, that we create that buzz. But unfortunately, due to pandemic, we have to that reduce all the activities. So. So from this point of view, I think that that we have lots of opportunities. What actually Bijan mentioned, that if you look at the internet penetration, and also the adaptability of people's, that the mindset. There is no age bar. If Bijan mentioned about the Bcash, so if you look at the demography and the users, the variability. So that the people like that the 60s age, they are also using the Bcash. Those who are the that one of the key that the lifeblood of these fintech users are the RMG sectors people, and also the farmer and other that the daily that warrior kind of people. So in that point of view, I must say that there is a huge potential, like that if you come up with that some sort of innovative idea, then the people, Bangladeshi people, can easily adapt with the whole thing. But then again, the problem is, that as that I get the chance to work with the startup very directly, that from UNDP, and right now I am also working with a number of startups from the IDEA project and from Startup Bangladesh. So the problem is, like that when a startup they come up with their idea, there is a problem of mindset. That the social stigma kind of thing. Like when a startup starting their that business. Their peer group is not that much happy to actually encourage them to continue their business. So this is a big problem. I have to say that should create a hurdle for them. And then again, there is a few other things like the capital, the mentoring and the financial kind of thing, and eventually to some extent the HR, like that the good resources who can actually continue this kind of thing. Yeah.
Thanks, Siddhartha. Yeah, I think those are also very recognizable. They really fit well what Bijan said about the image of Bangladesh. Basically, is what it boils down to. I think that's something. You need to back up the story also with some of the numbers, right? So I'm also very interested to explore how the branding of Bangladesh can improve, because I think we all agree that the opportunities are absolutely there. Nirjor, can I ask you to respond from your perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So I think, for me, in my kind of day-to-day role, the three kind of elements of the ecosystem that I guess, rush headlong into are liquidity, policy, and talent, right? So on the liquidity side, I think it's definitely improving. So as Bijan mentioned, we've already had 2/3 of the entire fundraising in all of 2020 being raised in the last 6 or 7 weeks in Bangladesh. So I think that's quite increasing. I think there's a lot more kind of local capital, right? Not just angel finance, but also like IDLC with their fund. And we'll hope to see more and more financial institutions get their funds off the ground this year. Obviously, local VCs like Anchorless, international VCs, but also I think Startup Bangladesh has been phenomenally active over the last few weeks, and we're quite excited to see the work coming out of that. On the policy side, I think that's where we still suffer a lot, or at least we deal with a lot of challenges. On one side, I think it's a question of instruments. Everywhere in the world, there's a lot of founder-friendly instruments, convertible notes, safe notes. In Bangladesh, you can't really do those. You can only do those through de facto means. I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of founders in Bangladesh, not the only one, but one of the reasons why a lot of founders are re-domiciling to places like Singapore, which is, I guess, fine in the short term. But I think in the long run, we'd love to see the domestic kind of ecosystem become a little bit easier, right, when it comes to these sorts of more flexible forms of capital. Another challenge that I face, for example, once again, everywhere in the world, when it comes to raising angel investment, you're able to bundle a lot of small tickets from a lot of different angel investors by way of special purpose vehicles, which then come into the company's cap table as one entity, which helps a lot for entrepreneurs because you don't have to deal with 10, 20 different investors at a time. You're dealing with one entity and ideally a proxy from that entity. In Bangladesh, that mechanism does not exist. We really needed that to exist, especially in order to democratize angel investing, make it easier for smaller ticket investors, including those who are in the capital markets, to be able to then invest in startups. A lot of them want to, but right now they're being shut out of it. So that's also important. And then the last piece is repatriation. Every time I talk to somebody from the diaspora, every time I talk to a foreign investor, the first question that comes up is, how do I get my money out? And I guess, well, I have to say, well, it depends. And so that's not a good enough answer if we're going to grow the ecosystem, right? So I think those are the three areas that we really have to, as an ecosystem, work together to solve. And then the last part is talent. I think it's improving a lot, even in the 2 years that I've started working in this space. You still see a lot of non-technical founders. You still see some part-time founders. You still see founders who may not be experts in their field. But that's changing rapidly. I think a key thing is one, we now have Series A and Series B stage companies that have scaled, and we have people who've grown up within those companies and environments, who've learned from some of our more successful entrepreneurs who are now becoming founders themselves. So that's really exciting because they know how to operate with the startup mindset. I think that's the key part. Second is I think we have an incredible talent base in the country. And it's not just people coming from Dhaka University or BUET, all due respect to those institutions. They are the top of the top. But I'm I'm lucky enough to be part of an accelerator with NSU. The companies that are coming out of it is incredible. Some of the top companies in Bangladesh actually are being run by NSU, North-South University alumni. When we look at, a lot of diaspora people that I speak with who work at the major tech companies in the world, the Googles, the Facebooks, the Amazons of the world, they're coming not just from BUET, but places like Islamic University of Technology in Gachipur or Kuwait in Khulna. So that's exciting as well, right? I mean, we have a lot of talent within the Bangladeshi diaspora as well as in the ecosystem. I guess how do we unlock them and get more of them to either contribute to startups as angel investors and mentors or as founders? I think that's the key question going forward. So those are, I guess, the three elements I would say is liquidity, policy, and talent.
Thank you so much, Nirjor. And then over to Zinat.
Yes. So one of the important components of the entrepreneurship ecosystem would be like education institutions. As Mr. Theodore mentioned, that universities, they play a big, important role, and I think it's one of the foundation roles. Traditionally, when we're in school, we learn, okay, you study hard, work hard, and go work for big companies, and it's often this profit maximizing companies. So I think changing the mindset there, from an early age, if you can think to be an entrepreneur, not just be someone working at another company, but someone who can create their own company. As Professor Mohammed says, there's an entrepreneur in everyone. So, back in the day, back in school, we were always taught, okay, get good grades, then get a good job. But now it's changing, and now young people are being entrepreneurs, are being encouraged to become entrepreneurs. So changing that mindset, I think, is still a challenge. Maybe not so much in the cities, but maybe in rural areas, people are still wanting to get that good job. I think, getting that mindset into the education institutions in the rural areas is also important. And from Unicenter to the establishment of the YSBCs, as I mentioned, we work to help institutions develop social business courses, to workshop, promote the subject, create awareness. That's something from Unicenter we do on the topic of social business and entrepreneurship. So that's it from my end here.
Thank you so much, Zinat. And I think I think the word mindset is one that we've heard a few times already during this discussion, and it's also where I'd like to take the third round of questions, basically, because now that we've delved into the ecosystem a little bit and we've discussed how some of the elements, some of the structural challenges are the same as before the pandemic. Some of them might have been exacerbated or changed a little bit, but in the end, I want to bring it down to. I'll get to you, Taylor, in a second. I want to bring it down to the individual level. What does it mean for the next generation social entrepreneur? Theodore, do you want to respond on the previous question still?
Yeah, I wanted to ask something the other panelists.
Sure, let's do that before we go to the next question then.
Yes, thank you. So I heard you talking about investments, and I completely agree that that's a super important landscape that is actually propelling growth and enabling young ideas to become mature businesses. But I wonder whether all the ecosystem players of Bangladesh have come together on a regular basis, identify the challenges, and really with one voice address them to the people that are responsible to instigate change. Because we cannot talk about universities and we cannot talk about the financial landscape if not all the hubs, backed up by real cases from entrepreneurs, start discussing and mapping the challenges before we can talk about all those opportunities that are in your ecosystem. So that's a question to you all. Maybe one or two want to respond to that.
Thanks, Theodore. And it's actually one question that I considered shooting back at you, like how does the collaboration work then? But let's put it out here. Is there anybody in particular who wants to respond to this one? The question is basically, how do we actually shape that collaboration and where are the responsibilities and how do we actually do that in principle, in practice? Bijan?
Sure, maybe I can offer a few perspectives. I think because the ecosystem is very early stage, I think we haven't seen a lot of collaboration still happening. Even if I just look at the investment space as kind of like a subsection again, of the 300 million or so invested in startups, I think 275 or 270 million are international investments, right? Only 25 to 30 million are local investment, primarily angel investments. But if we are to collaborate, corporate venture capital needs to come in. And that's how all the large ecosystems in the world have grown, right? In India, if you're looking at, we are seeing a large investments happening from Jio. We are seeing large investments happening from Future Bazaar Group. Or if you look at China, a lot of these investments are happening from Tencent or the Ant Financial, Alibaba Group, right? So I think corporate venture capital needs to come in. We have business houses here. Some of them are experimenting with their fully owned subsidiaries, like Pran investing in Othoba, which is an e-commerce website, but Pran fully owns it. But where do we see this evolving and corporate venture capital is coming in? And then that's only one part of the ecosystem because it only also depends on the flow of the talent. And there where I think the industry-academia linkage is weak, right? Our talents are also coming back into the industry in a way that will lead the next generation of growth for Bangladesh. I think all of us in the ecosystem needs to realize that the next 10 years for Bangladesh is very crucial and we will need a different breed of entrepreneurs. The companies themselves have to reinvent themselves, right? And you can do those innovations until there's a thriving entrepreneurship ecosystem where innovation can grow. And to do that for our own good, we need to enhance more collaboration. I think that's where, in my mind, I think corporate venture capitals and industry academia linkage is some of the things that we really need to look at and push all together as an ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else who wants to respond to that at this point?
I
Sharika?
would like to add a few points. I think a thriving ecosystem is what young entrepreneur needs, but investments and money, I think that is something that comes at the very last stage of the entire chain. I think designing social businesses, keeping our beneficiaries at heart is something that's very important. Our young entrepreneurs need to be able to reach to our community, to be able to share their ideas and learn from people who have already been there and done that. And they also need to be able to be supported from communities who have resources. So let's say, for example, like Zinat was talking about education, it's very important. Maybe opening more social business clubs or offering more entrepreneur courses at universities or schools. I think that will also create a very great opportunity for our young entrepreneurs.
Thank you, Sharika. And maybe also just to get Nedor's opinion here, because I'm wondering also what your perspective is from the angel investment side of things.
Yeah, sure. I think, the biggest example I could kind of give is something that Bijan and I are quite involved with. It's called Bangladesh Startup Consortium. So that was initially just started as a WhatsApp group, really, during the height of the pandemic, because we needed to kind of give some ideas on a potential rescue package for the startup sector. And then we all kind of started, looked around and realized, hey, there is no actual body that represents the voice of the startups. There are organizations that, for example, represent software companies or outsourcing companies, but not necessarily startups themselves, product-driven startups. We did kind of put forth a proposal. Some of those have been public. Some elements of that have started kind of gaining traction. But I think the biggest, I guess, outcome of that was, one, the ecosystem kind of came together, major startups, angel investors, VCs came together. And second, for the first time, we were able to quantify some of the impacts of the startup sector as a whole. So for example, 500,000 kind of SMEs are dependent on various platforms. I think 3.6 million jobs are either directly or indirectly dependent on this sector. So that's one example. The second one, I think, in terms of tangible outcomes. So recently, once again, Bijan and I were quite involved in this. We worked together with Bangladesh Startup Consortium, led by Ms. Tina Javeen from Startup Bangladesh, plus the Education Ministry, to be able to then map out the edtech sector in Bangladesh. We've interviewed a ton of organizations, and then from there, we were able to help I think at least 10 to 15 edtech companies get a contract from the Education Ministry to start supplying content as a new form of revenue for them. And now they're actually generating that revenue. It's going into their operations. They're now using that to grow their various companies, for example, and they're using that also to raise funding. So that's exciting as well. Like, that's a great example of a public-private partnership, right? So we need more of that, right? And I think the key thing is all these ad hoc sort of developments that happen because we were forced against the wall in 2020. Let's continue to maybe be a bit more strategic and then continue working together in 2021.
Thanks a lot, Nerjor. I'd like to move to the next question, if that's all right with everyone. The next question was, I'll repeat it one more time. So, I mean, now that we've talked about the ecosystem as a whole and also the impact of the pandemic, I'd like to unpack a little bit more what it means for sort of, I think, the hashtag of today, one of the two hashtags is hashtag no going back, right? I think that we all agree that the pandemic is causing structural changes in the way we do business. And in particular also for the next generation of social entrepreneurs. I'd be interested to learn your views on what skills and what competencies do they need. I realize it's a broad question. I realize it might differ per sector, but who wants to take up the floor and start to kick this one off? Sharika?
Sure, thank you. I think skills and skill sets can be learned over time. If you don't have a certain skill, you can acquire it very easily. But I think for our entrepreneurs, drive is something that's very important. And if you don't have drive, and if you're not committed, then maybe something that's just an idea will never come to life. So your idea may be crazy, it may not seem feasible, or it may not seem something that can be turned into life, but we would always urge you to keep that drive, stay committed, and maybe, who knows, your crazy idea might be something that changed the world.
Thank you so much.
May I go next?
Siddhartha, please.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for the skill set point of view regarding the social startups or social business, which is essential for the startup to actually educating their investor as well. Like why investor will put money on social business. This is a big question and the big dilemma, because all the time investor is looking for the low-hanging fruit that they can actually take profit out of it. So, I mean, why they need to actually invest on social business that can create impact? Because nowadays, mostly investor is looking for that, their profit. So, particularly if you look at the principle of social business kind of thing, from my experience, that when I, led, the social entrepreneur from United Nations Development Program, what I found that after providing a certain, that the grant support, startup couldn't actually continue their activities, or they couldn't actually make sustainable business because of their business model itself is actually that creating impact, which is actually that serving social goods rather than the making money. So at one point they didn't actually that move forward because of that some that patronization kind of thing. So I think this is this is a very, very basic skill what our startup need to know, that how they will actually educate their investors, how they will educate their donors, and at the same time the ecosystem player also need to know that we have to think about the social startups and social business people as well, because it's work for the the bigger good and the social good as well.
Thanks, Siddhartha. Who can I give the floor next? Let's see, maybe Zinat?
Yeah.
Do you want to come in?
I would just again say the same thing. It's ultimately, I think, the mindset, because it's the same mindset you've been carrying on for so many hundreds of years. It's always been about making money, making money. And this shifting to, looking at social impact being the bigger thing, what you want to aim at. I think it takes a huge, shift in mindset. So ultimately, as Sharika said, skills can be learned, and even with the social business, a regular business is the same thing. Just the social business, the difference is it serves a social purpose. So ultimately, the shift in mindset and sticking to it, there will be hurdles because our current ecosystem is really not favorable for such businesses. It's more about profit making, so the rules, regulations, laws are more adapted towards profit making initiatives. So to have that persistence and have that mindset to develop that social business and stick to it would be, I think, the challenge and the skill set you would follow if you can follow, if you can have that mindset and stick to it, basically.
Right, thank you so much. Let's see, maybe Theodore?
Yeah, I think what kind of skills social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general need, it's more or less no. Everybody mentioned mindset. I believe that's the biggest thing. But it also takes soft skills that need to be taught by somebody, digital skills. I mean, look at DACA. It has 22 million users on Facebook only. That in mind, and the marketplace in mind that Facebook has, it gives a tremendous, easy to access e-commerce platform that can be used. Of course, passion is one, and local role models. I think that's something that young entrepreneurs need to really relate to them. It's fine if I relate to Mark Zuckerberg, but he studied at Harvard in a completely different environment. So we need local role models that can be celebrated. And we need to understand that it also takes a societal change. I am sure, although I've never been to your beautiful country, I am sure that failing is not an option and is not accepted. But let's celebrate failure, because it's the biggest free lesson you can get, and especially when you're starting. That testing and prototyping and failing again and again and again is making you actually the most valuable individual. And it gives you also all the ingredients to make impact. And of course, it also needs that fertile ground that we've discussed about, where you can plant your seed, and with the support of all the ecosystem players, it can help you grow. And then you will see that funding will come to you and you will not go to funding. That's what we've seen in all the ecosystems, from the most mature ones in Silicon Valley to the most fragile ones, like the one in some of the countries that I visited. But not going social and not creating that social value, as Zainat said, I think it's a no-go anymore. We are at the tip where we can no longer reverse if we do more harm to our environment and society. So we need to think on a social impactful way.
Not going social is a no-go. That's a very nice one. Thanks, Theodore. Bijan, do you want to add on to this?
Yeah, sure. I think there was a time we used to think commercial organizations, traditional for-profit and not-for-profit. I think that line is converging, right? All organizations that we look at, they won't be there just to tell that I'm selling a product to make money. Everyone, there is a spectrum, obviously, but most companies have double bottom lines. They will look at profit, financial return, but they will also look at social and environmental returns as well, and measurable, right? And I think that concept will gain more popularity in the future as organizations grow. They understand that they are here to do business, and if the society and the environment doesn't exist, over the long term, all of us lose out. We are a species only on one planet. I'm not sure if we can go to Mars, but to go there effectively, multi-planetary species, that's a long way from here. As long as we're still on this planet, I think that triple bottom line of people, profit, planet. I think a lot of organizations are there. Given that a lot of organizations are moving there in a spectrum, not all at the same pace, when we look at entrepreneurs, I try to see three things, and I believe that is something they need to develop at an early stage. The first thing we look at are critical thinking, problem-solving skills. Can they critically think? Can they problem solve? If they get stuck, where they can go next? B, can they communicate well? Can they tell their story? Can they explain their products and services? Have they convinced some early users, right? So, can they explain their product service market? So that, and the last thing is integrity, right? And by integrity, I just don't mean honest, because a lot of these impact enterprises are there because they want to do good to the world and to the community, but also can they maintain integrity in all their kind of interactions? Do the founders have proper documentation? Are they maintaining their books? Are all things in shape? Do they have integrity and governance in the business itself? I think these are some of the early things that we definitely look at impact enterprises when you look at them, or any organization. But I think social entrepreneurs or impact entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs in general should definitely look at these factors as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Bijan. And before we go over to Nirjar, maybe I'll add it with one small question on top of this. I think what you just said, Bijan, about especially the convergence of for-profit and social business, or social impact, I think you could probably argue that there's increasingly a business model in social business, also from purely a business sense. So with that remark, let's head over to Nirjar and see if he agrees or not, and what his views are.
Yeah, I think I would agree with qualifications, I suppose, because I deal on the fundraising side. So I think I wrote a whole article actually on, I guess, positive traits or best practices of impact entrepreneurs looking for funding, and Bijan was quite helpful on that. So I'm happy to share this with the team afterwards. Maybe we can have more discussions offline. I guess I would echo the mindset piece, and I think in particular, the challenge I face often when sitting across the table, or I guess a Zoom call with impact entrepreneurs is, they're often impact first, which is great. That's the ethos is great. The mindset is awesome. But I think they think the proposals or the business proposals they kind of give is more about, okay, I need to reach this many people. It's almost like a grant proposal, right? And I think where we're looking for is, you have to seek the business opportunity here, as Boss said, right? You have to identify a market. You have to have a sustainable revenue model. Your unit economics need to work because you might get grants at the beginning to subsidize some of your activities. But those are not forever, as Theo also mentioned at the beginning of this call, right? That even funders now are looking for sustainable solutions, especially with local capital. I think as tied to that is, I think, scalability, right? It doesn't help people if you're stuck with 100 users or customers or people impacted. It doesn't help with even 1,000 people. I think you got to think about tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. And as part of that, and going back to there's a return on capital, particularly to compensate investors for the risk they're taking when they invest in you. 10 or 20% growth per year isn't enough, right? Even 10 or 20% per month isn't enough. It's really exponential growth that comes from 10 or double-digit growth every week. Those are the kinds of companies that will get a lot of funding, and it's a sort of virtuous cycle. And so I guess how do you build that within your business model? It's not something that happens overnight, but you have to have that vision, and you have to continually iterate on it. I think those are some of the things that I like kind of seeing when I sit across from an entrepreneur. And then lastly, I think, you just have to be relentless. Everything's against you in many ways when you're an entrepreneur. I think it's the most noble calling because of that. But you have to be relentless in your personal growth, in your team's growth, and I think in your business's growth, and including, how you serve customers. I think those are some of the traits that I love seeing. I love working with. We'd love to have conversations offline with some of you who are in the room today.
Thank you so much, Nirjar. I'd like to go over to open the floor for questions from the audience. I've already received a few questions here, but I also want to open it here to see if people here in the room want to pose questions to our panelists. So I'll just look at if there's any hands right now, and if not, then I'll kick it off with one question of myself, and then we'll go into these questions to follow it up. So maybe just back to something that both Nirjar and Bijan already mentioned, right? I was looking at a tool that Lightcastle produced, I think last week, where you see the fundraising for startups over the last 10 years. And I thought it was interesting, and I would recommend everybody to have a look at it because you can see per year, and it has a breakdown per sector, and yeah, it's fascinating. I noticed that up until about 2018, it was very difficult to get above, say, $20 million a year, and then all of a sudden in 2018, there was a 100 million of startup funds raised. And I just wonder if you could take us a little bit back to that, like what can we learn from that? What happened there, and how does that echo to today?
Sure, I think that's a very interesting question. First, I would like to clarify that even though we are hosting the dashboard, it was made with substantial contribution from the Bangladesh Angels Network, Anchorless Bangladesh, and Startup Bangladesh Limited. So it's kind of a joint effort. We have been lucky to host in our website, but it's an initiative, joint initiative. I think if we look at 2018, there's a big number, of course, because Ant Financials invested in Bikash, so large amount of ticket. But if you take that data out to normalize, you see it's year on year it's growing. Like even in 2020, we had 36 million. And the first couple of months in 2021, we already have 22 million. I think what you need to realize is that when the ecosystem started, maybe 2010, 11, right? We had a lot of early stage enterprises. And a part of them are becoming Series A, Series B, Series C companies, right? So we are having companies like ShopUp, we are having companies like SBYS, Chaldal, Patao, Shohoj, right? iFarmer, and all these companies who were quite early stage. Chaldal has become almost massive. They have 13 warehouses right now. Patao is not only in Bangladesh, but they have expanded to Nepal, right? Companies like SBYS have, has, double-digit growth rates almost every month. It reaches out to 5.5 lakh SMEs. So I think the scale have grown. And in the world outside have seen there are big business opportunities in Bangladesh, and that's where the funding is also coming, right? So I think the early seeds that happened in 2010, 11 through all these incubation programs, including YY Goshti, what they did, the hard work of the community builders, I think we're seeing the result of that, right? Sheba came out of the Grameenphone Accelerator, where we are also one of the partners, right? A lot of the early companies that BAN helped fund are also expanding right now. So I think that is what we are seeing. Series A, Series B, Series C company coming along. And as that journey goes, we definitely believe the funding landscape will substantially improve over the next 5 years as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nejor, do you want to also respond on this one?
Yeah, I think 2018 was an inflection point for a couple of reasons. So one was definitely the Bcash deal. The second was obviously the big deals in terms of Shohoj and Patao, right? So it was at the height of sort of ride-hailing kind of boom globally, and I think we benefited from that. I think a lesson here, right, is that Bangladesh itself is still a relatively small country when it comes to its digital economy, but obviously there's a global kind of digital economy, and there's a lot of different verticals within that. And for companies to be able to raise international capital, I think it helps to align and try to create business models where you see replicas, or at least bigger versions of that in other countries, including the sort of ecosystems we have sandwiching us, like Singapore, like Indonesia, like India, and to an extent maybe Japan, China, as well as Australia. So I think, it doesn't happen in a sort of vacuum, right? Bangladesh is and becoming a greater part of the global startup landscape. And I think, the role of domestic ecosystem builders as well as venture or investors like us is to kind of find those companies and get them to that level. Because we need, for them to really supercharge their growth, and they'll need bigger and more, I guess, experienced forms of capital. And right now, that's only going to come from international. But that could change in the next, 5 or 6 years as our own ecosystem matures.
Right. Thank you so much. I've also received some questions from the audience, but feel free to send questions that I can also ask to our panelists. These two are actually very similar, by Samin Yassar and Fahim Muntasir, and they're both on the prospects for investment in Bangladesh from the point of view of foreign investors. I'm not sure, it's not directed at anybody, but maybe, Shitra, do you want to say a few words about that?
Well, I would say that right now our startup should think about some, opportunities like due to pandemic, we actually thought about some, tools that we never think about, like, the healthcare you can actually provide it health support from remotely. You can also provide some, the education from remotely. So this sort of thing you can actually think about that we didn't actually think about. So this sort of support and this sort of services our startup can think about. So in those areas, they can think.
That makes sense. Yeah, thanks. Anybody else wants to respond on this one? I think we've discussed it a little bit already, right? It's also a bit on the business climate. I think many of the metrics don't necessarily look good, but I do think many parties are actually showing increasingly like a lot of good examples and opportunities. So I'm thinking that that is definitely moving. Are there any questions here in the public for our panelists? If not, then I think we can also go over to basically a next and final part. I thought it was exciting to see if we can get some sort of free nuggets of advice from our panelists. So I've asked them to prepare basically one important takeaway that they will share with you, and they'll say what it is, and they'll also say at who they aim it. So I hope that also gives us a little bit of insight into basically how we can continue this dialogue and this conversation and what we can actually do with it. Because I think that's, of course, why we're doing this, to gain the knowledge, to change the perspectives, and to see what the way forward is. So if there's no further questions, then let's move on to that. Maybe we can start with Zinat.
Yes. So I think for overall, because I focus on academic institutions and collaborating with them to establish social business, initiate social business initiatives and on. But one thing they was mentioning, the connection between private companies and such the talents, university students, how you can connect them, and can carry it further. Often students right after they graduate, they don't have the funding, nor do they have, they need a mentor, of course, also, to guide them. So being able to make this connection to kind of, be able to set that mindset while you're young, that you want to develop businesses that will be socially beneficial. And your own business or work for one is something that can be focused on. So from Unicenter, that's what we do through our YSBC initiative. And now during the pandemic, we are having these YSBC web lecture series, basically where entrepreneurs in the Grameen network and beyond are able to share their stories. So we have had Miss Andrea Jung, who runs Grameen America. She talked about her microcredit experience in one of them. Then we have had we had a management position who from McCain, who talked about their project in Colombia. We will have Mr. Emmanuel Faber, who's the CEO of Danone, talk about his Danone experience. There's a Shokti Doi, it's a social business in Bangladesh. He will talk about those experiences. So kind of helping, sharing with students. These are aimed at our students, but also entrepreneurs. It's like a Zoom session we have on the first and the third Monday of every month. So if anyone is interested, please tune in. The information is on the Unicenter website. So I think they're very important sessions through which people are able to know how such businesses happened, the challenges they faced, and how interested people can maybe replicate such things. So that's my take. So I would
Thank you so much, Zinat. And I think this one is really also aimed at the entrepreneurs, right? Make use of those resources that are out there, the connections. You have to find them, I think, and the Unicenter is definitely offering them. Thanks so much.
One more thing I would like to add,
sure,
especially for the students, we will be having a social business competition. I think in the Bangladesh environment, I've seen a lot of young talents being taken from competitions, winners of competitions, I think. The social business competition is going to be something that's going to be launched very soon. So it's open to university students and hopefully entrepreneurs. So if you're interested, please look at it. Again, the information will be on our website. And Sharika mentioned the social business clubs, also something for university students and interested people. All of the information you'll be finding on our website soon. So please do look at it.
Thanks, Zina. That sounds really good. And I think the advice is to be competitive. Thanks. Right, who's next? Maybe someone from here? Sharika, do you want to?
Sure. So right now at YY Goshti, we are currently offering 3 different programs, 3 incubation programs. One is our YY Goshti incubation program for the spring cohort. So if anybody is willing to apply, they are more than welcome to. You just have to go to yygoshti.com/incubator. And then the other one is the Digital Kitchery Challenge, which we have in partnership with UNDP. And the last one is a healthcare incubator, which is in partnership with students from St. Gallen University in Switzerland. So we have 3 incubation programs running currently.
Excellent, thank you so much. So again, as the entrepreneurs, make use of the incubation possibilities that exist. YY Goshti is offering them.
Absolutely. And
Excellent.
one thing I would really like to emphasize on, we need more female entrepreneurs.
We need more female entrepreneurs.
This is something that I have really noticed in my very short time that I have been with YY Ventures, that we struggle a lot with female entrepreneurs. We would like to see more applications from females, and we would like to see females participating in this space. We are always available, this entire panel. We would be more than happy to have female representatives and female participation. And if anybody needs anything, I'm sure everybody over here in this panelist will be more than happy to help out. So if there is any sort of question or anything that we can help you with, please don't hold yourself back to reach out to us.
Thank you so much, Sharika, and that's a very concrete follow-up point for the ladies out there with good ideas and high ambitions for social business. Thank you so much. Shripto?
Yeah, I'd like to take the opportunity to share one information with our audience who is actually listening from this country or abroad. Currently, we are offering a program. It's called Bangabandhu Innovation Grant. To celebrate our Father of Nation 100th birth centenary, we launched this program. So tomorrow is the last date of application, where we are actually, offering a good, grants, $100,000 for one startup, and apart from the first prize, we are also offering 1 million BDT for rest of the 35 startup. And apart from this special program, we are also offering, that regular, that pre-seed grant and the mentoring support through our project, and we're also providing some, that incubation, mentoring support kind of thing. So I think who is listening to us, just visit our website and drop your ideas. Yeah,
I think there's almost too many programs to attend all at the same time, right? There's almost a competition ongoing, but that's great. Thank you so much. Theodore?
Yeah, I don't think I need to give more advices to the startups. A lot has been said already, but I would like to give some food for thought for the ecosystem players that are there today. Know that our government will be your biggest supporter, but I'll make sure that we can also follow your progress on that. As you are a young ecosystem, I find there's a tremendous opportunity. Make sure that you have an association. Some of you mentioned it. It's very important to have an association so you can unite your voice and meet regularly and communicate about it and map your challenges and again communicate about them so that you can create some kind of a roadmap to startup. If you count your startups, your pipeline is super small, super small, taking into account the millions and millions of people that live in your country. So have a clear roadmap to startup that explains what are the do's and don'ts and how to establish a business, and get buy-in from your government, because all us foreign donors will be there unless a new hype will come in, because entrepreneurship is a hype and it's there to stay, but pay attention that it is a hype. So you need those connections to the private sector, and make sure that whatever you do as an association, once you're established, you follow up and you practice what we preach. So because we need to talk less and do more, and data will be our enabling factor. Whether you want to be invested or you want to start a new program, Your data will be your biggest evidence that you can deliver impact and you can deliver whatever has been asked. That's from my side. Stay in touch with the Dutch.
Thank you so much, Theodore. And yes, the call to associate and the call to use data to back up whatever you're doing is well heard. Thank you so much. Neerjor, can we ask you to shed your perspective?
Yeah, sure. I wish I had a program to kind of offer, but in the meantime, my email is out there. My number is also listed on our website, so feel free to get in touch anytime. I think I would just echo what my other panelists have said. Obviously there's a lot of programs on the ground, lots of resources to take advantage. Please do. But I'm also just kind of amazed, I think, at the sort of maybe entrepreneurship is a hype, but it is a whole universe. There's a whole tens of thousands of different people, whether it's on platforms like AngelList or LinkedIn or various podcasts, right? Thanks, Theo. And what I found, and I think I would echo something I learned from one of our investees, we invested in them in the summer. They then went on to raise capital from Singapore and the US. Recently, they've signed a 7-figure contract for business development. And one thing he was saying is that, he was never afraid, right? He would reach out to people, doesn't matter how big they are, how big the VC is, and say, look, I'm from Bangladesh. I've got a story to tell. Can you give me 30 minutes to tell that story? And I'd also love to learn about what you're doing. A lot of people just want data on Bangladesh, right? That itself is a great entry point. So don't be afraid. Go out and reach out. Like, all of you are great ambassadors because you're Bangladeshi entrepreneurs, and I think you carry that on your sleeve. And so let's go out and kind of make a name for ourselves. Let's make that happen in 2021.
Thank you so much, Neerjor. And don't be afraid is really one that fits well with the no going back hashtag, I think. This basically means that we are at the end of the discussion here. So I would like to thank the panelists, both here physically and our virtual panelists. I've learned a lot. I've picked up a lot. I think this is it can be a very abstract and a very tough discussion. The ecosystem itself lends itself to a discussion that you can have until late in the evening on what it is and what it should do and what it should not do. But I've definitely heard many encouraging things. A couple of small things to just pick out, not a complete summary, but just a couple of things that stuck with me. That is to really not be afraid of finding those connections, working together. We're in this together. We have to work with each other and within the ecosystem to really get somewhere. And as an individual, to me it seems that, and this brings me back a little bit to the words of Mustafis this morning, when he said that, when I started 15 years ago, there was nothing. I think there's a lot out there now. And I think we just heard only a few of the options. So I would urge all entrepreneurs here to use those resources to the best of their ability and to change the world for the better, onwards to that world of 3 zeros.